I think there's 250 craft studios in Santa Cruz. There's ceramic studios, glass studios. It's a great artist community. You know, I know people would say, oh, a California artist, but being creative is like who I am. Making clothes is who I am. It's my world, and I love it. My mom sewed, and she taught us to sew. When I was, I would say, junior high, my mom taught me on this machine, this little Singer, and it's just simple. It's not involved to thread, or it just makes me happy when I sit at this machine. I started out, of course, it was the 60s, and you know, the 60s was all about back to the land, and so we wanted to make everything. I would get the raw wool and card it, and then I had to spin it, and then I would weave with the yarn that I spun. I had met Gordon. We were living together, and I taught him to weave, and he would do the shows with me. I was doing scarves and pillows, and I was doing carpets. I kind of business-wise knew that women were going to spend more on clothes than on carpets, so I wove and made clothes.
The music was outrageous. People were growing their hair long, and then all of the flamboyant clothing. There was also all the crochet and the beads. It was just part of the laid-back, really relaxed, something to do with your hands.
I would like to say it's all a haze, you know. If you remember it, you weren't there.
It was an overall rebellion. People wanted to choose sides. One way was to dress appropriately or not. I see wearable art as something that really rises above the average, way above the average, and becomes something other than just a coat or your grandmother's hand-knitted shawl.
Wearable art is clothing made by people who identify as artists, usually from their own handmade textiles. And originally, it was pieces that were one of a kind.
This coat was commissioned and created for me. The elements are just so dramatic. It was a wonderful piece. I love it. I still love it. Janet Lipkin incorporated interesting materials in her work, predominantly crochet, but a lot of them are embellished with beads. I wish I were a better hat person. I would have worn them far more.
Wearable art in California grew out of the handmade, do-it-yourself impulse. And the idea that mass-produced clothing is soulless. Tie-dyeing, the quintessential hippie decorative technique, is a very simple form of shibori dyeing. It is one of the key techniques for artwear. A lot of artists were using the garment as metaphor. You have garments that anthropomorphize people. You have garments that are political. You have garments that are landscapes. And many people were thinking of these garments not only as hanging on the body, they were also thinking about them as hanging on the wall. There was this dual wearable, unwearable aspect to them. It began with the textile and this laborious, loving, obsessive hand-making process.
I want to see the red one, this one, yeah.
Show us that?
Yeah. When I saw what other weavers were doing, it was like the cocoon. It was much more flowy, unconstructed, and I knew I could do better. I knew how to sew clothes, so I could do my woven, but make it more fitted. If you cut hand woven, it just falls apart. And people always thought, oh, that must have been scary to cut up your woven. But you know what? The fabric means nothing unless you make it into something where somebody loves to put it on. That's a really good feeling. Doing the craft shows, whether they were rinky-dink outdoor shows or at the Smithsonian, people were like, oh my God, you made this? And that's part of it. I couldn't wait to get back to the shop and create. I love that aspect of it.
We travel to all the major cities, probably about 10 shows a year. I mean, that's the fun of it. You know, the best part is going and selling, talking to the people, coming home and making it is another whole other thing.
Oh, the color's coming out really nice.
And you know how California is. It's a great place to have your studio and work on, you know, art and craft.
I've been working with Rosa Martinez for almost 30 years, and she is amazing. When we work together, we look at the piece, I say, Rosa, you know what? I'd like the collar to be higher or more. Oh, okay. We are just on the same page. Oh, great. You know, I really like doing the seams on the outside.
Okay.
That really worked out.
We read our minds. She marked the fabrics, and I do the cuttings. In Mexico, I went to the pattern school and sewing school. I love my work. It's my passion.
Part of the reason wearable art has been such a quintessentially California form are the places to study. UC Davis, UC Berkeley, California College of Arts and Crafts. Many of the artists came from non-fiber programs, and several of the early Bay Area artists started by painting on fabric.
Friend said, Sylvia, you don't wear clothes, you wear pieces, which is true. I've always referred to this work as pieces, not jacket, vest, whatever. Kaylee Manuel worked primarily with feathers and painted leather. This collar is very wearable. It just folds over the shoulders, ties in back, and forms to the body.
Jean CACICEDO's raincoat. It's a felted coat. The words rain are punched into the coat. And the coat itself is slashed full of little raindrops. It's a raincoat that is a rain shower, but it's full of holes. You are never, ever, ever going to be able to keep the water off you. KAISIK Wong grew up in the Bay Area. He went to Pacific Basin College of Fashion. And KAISIK was involved in the avant-garde underground world in San Francisco. He loved ethnic fabrics, Guatemalan ikat and Chinese brocade, and lame. He loved lame. KAISIK was doing something very individual. In 2002, Balenciaga sent a vest down the runway, and it was a dead ringer for a vest that KAISIK had designed in 1974.
You can't copyright any of this stuff. Yeah,
If you have the talent, you reinvent and move on. You don't, you can't protect anything. People were so creative. There were some just fabulous pieces of work that were so inventive, and as clothing, they weren't always the most comfortable things to wear. You felt like a walking sculpture.
You need a certain confidence to carry off a major piece of clothing so that you are wearing it instead of having it wear you.
This is Janet Lipkin. It's a sweater/jacket. The elements are flower shapes, petals. The collar will go up into a full sort of blossom effect around the face. It's a really nice example of her freeform crochet. I used to wear it all the time back in New York, but I couldn't go a half a block without being stopped by people. What is it? Who made it? How did you get it? And on and on and on. It finally
really
got to
true.
the point where, I mean, I'm serious, I could not wear it if I were in a hurry or that. I had to just leave it at the hotel. That was California. That was the impact it had. I mean, that really was California influence.
When I decided to make the transition from weaving myself to buying the fabric, just opened a whole world for me. I could take some of the color out and over-dye it, embellish it, do my appliques on it. I can airbrush out a color I don't like. It's just endless what I can do. It's like I have this canvas in front of me, but it's a garment. Living in California, the whole wearable art movement was happening, and it was so exciting to see all these artists. But it was conceptual clothing. And I knew I didn't want to do conceptual clothing, but that was an influence, that world of conceptual wearable art. I'm more wearable design. They're wearable art.
I'm not sure I agree with her. Although there is not necessarily overt content in Deborah Cross's work, there have always been people in this movement who concentrated on making beautiful clothes. And so to be called wearable art for just sheer physical aesthetic beauty, I think that's perfectly legitimate.
California, I think, had the ideas of design. The artists in California, they were different. It did look different. There's something in California mentally that's just more freeing. It really is a creative state.